And this is the website that we built. So it's fully functioning. You can go to it, you can add information. And I already logged in, but there is a login screen. It's going to be really fast. So if you could like take a snapshot right there, that's the login screen. It remembers my password information. It just jumps in.
Okay.
So also you can contact me at my username. And so the first thing you do is this is like a crude beginning. It's just a working prototype, but we can essentially add that person we're talking about. Like, okay, I want to add. I guess me. You would be you start off. So my family name, then just letters and reasonable numbers. And these are also like data validation, making sure that they're entering in numbers and they're not trying to hack your website and Hanako and stuff. So oh sure, I can zoom in on the browser like this.
Yeah.
Okay, there. Oh no, and see, our code runs super fast. So if I'm just gonna fill in dummy information so that so I'll explain it and then fill in the dummy information as you can see. So is that clear? So one thing we wanna the visual team was focused on was the user interface and the user story, and to make sure there's an understandable flow of information and what are the requirements, what we want the individual, what information we want from them to have a successful I guess addition to the database. So the first one is the basic information, that's the individual's information. And then when they finish that step, they can progress to the other relationships. And that's going to be used later in like to link that person to their parents. But one of the limitations of our database so far is you only can add an individual and their parents instead of the individual and their children. So if you wanted to add their children, you would have to add another individual and then talk about their parents who were the previous individual that you added. So that's one of the limitations. So we wanted to focus on the minimum amount of information that the user needed to input so that they don't have to deal with all this information. They can get a quick setup to adding the information. So father is not a number, these are unique languages that nobody speaks.
Support multiple languages.
Yeah. So when we hit next, we can choose a file, and this was basically the reason why it was intended as a request form is to upload information, but also upload supporting documents to that individual, because the idea of being it would go through a validation process, and you would have to provide something like a birth certificate, or in the case of something that's maybe not a requirement, you can add stuff like the presenter before was talking about adding photos maybe from like their high school and they're like an athlete or something. So just something that links other records that they existed at this time and who they were. But the priority was a validation. So we just thought you could just upload any image. So I can just, this is the new 2022. So its birthday was this year. So when we add it, there's this validation. This is good for making sure that our database works, because we had a bunch of ideas, but getting to this point where it's a live website and it's functional, it's a huge deal to see that it's, hey, you did a good job, you know what you're doing, and you can view right now. Raul, he created a view into the database to see all the records that we've been just jamming in there to make it easy for the presentation. So I'll just click on the view submitted records, and then you'll see just all the records. So it starts off with a 101 ID, and that's just a unique identifier to the person you added. So then when every new person you add, it just iterates to one more from that. So 102 is the next one. These are all siblings. The ADF. And what you notice, it's live. So I handed the code off. I uploaded it to GitHub, and that means other people can work on it. So Andrew, our teammate, who was supposed to do the back end work, but somehow we swapped places, and he did front end, I did the back end. He started working on the code that I pushed out. I said, okay, I'm done with, we finished the back end. Could you help polish up the front end and make it nice, like how you see today? He uploaded his information on his side. So it's live in the sense that he can access it from his computer, upload it, and I can access it. So it's a proof that now anybody who has access to this and who has an account, they can add their information. And it's a single database of all of these so far. So it's just proof of concept, everything's working correctly. And then just I guess working backwards of, this is what we ended up with, where you can see like what our goal is. So here's the login screen paused, and so you do your login, and this is part of the user story. So this is thanks to the design team. We got all of you. These Wahinas in front. Well, yeah, so I'm gonna finish the presentation, and because what happened was in the span of time that we had to focus on one feature, and that was the request form. And then we did a quick visualization, and we got the code up and running. And then after, Carlos is gonna show, if we had more time and a bigger budget, what we could provide. So this is the user flow. It's similar, and hopefully you can kind of see that the site that we created is pretty similar to what we had in mind. So it didn't just come from nothing. It was built every step of the way. The team broke up into the front end, back end developers, and the visualization team. They handed us the visualization, and then we programmed that up. Before that this is what it looked like, just more crude. And this is what I handed off to Andrew. So thanks to Andrew for making this look more like what we intended. And then this is the database. This is actually the interface, the service that's interfacing with the database, because you can't just code all day. Like here's an example of, you don't want to just look at this all day. This is a little bit more easier to interact with, but we can make sure that the database is running correctly. And you can kind of see this is where all the information is laid. And then this is all the files on the software. So the site we made, this is like the whole collection. This is how we're sharing it. He's making updates. Raul over there, he's making updates. Andrew's making updates, and then I just learned how to use this tool. So I'm updating my knowledge, I guess. And then here's the hosting platform that is where the website is stored. The database is stored. And that's important because we're not just making something that's local on the machine. It's alive and living, and it's just working. And I guess the theme I'm going backwards in time is we're using a lot of tools, because we had a simple idea, but in order to complete that idea, we're using a bunch of the infrastructure needed had to be built beforehand. So we're using stuff like to make the buttons all pretty and stuff. We're using all these types of libraries that are pre-built, because we weren't able to finish this in the span of time that we had. And then this is the hosting site that we built up, and more information. And then it all started with that brainstorming. So going from those post-its on Figma to the final project, that's kind of this is probably the most exciting part. Like 8 o'clock at night, finding the things running from post-its the previous day. It's kind of a dream come true. So I'm gonna pass it down to Carlos. Do you need just 8 minutes?
Yeah, I'll try to make it.
So go for it.
Try to make it quick.
So again, he worked on, now that we have the proof of technology and the database going correctly, he's going to show us, blow our minds of what it could look like, what this one feature could look like in a fully functional website.
So yeah, we designed this out. This is the landing page right here, and I showed it to I was all stoked. I showed it to my wife this morning. She goes, "Oh, it looks like Google Drive." And I said, "Oh, that's because I use Google Material Design." But it comes back to what you were saying. It's been something that's been in my mind, which is like the visual language, the emotion, when people come to these sites, especially like the visualization, like they want to come and see like, oh, like this reflects Hawaii. Google Material Design does not. Until like my first stab, last night, because I was in sleep, so I was just getting super into it. I was like, hey, what if we do a color palette off of like where we were in the Maiʻa? So I took but a plugin by Google, so. But still, like, what are the ways that we can use color, typography, space to reflect, to reflect that, yeah. And so this is just a reflection of, what you just showed right now, but I was speaking through what the permission teams are doing. I was like, oh, this is super interesting. Like, how could we figure out a way, like, we're building up this tree, like, how can we start to like share this tree with other people, which you'll see. And so you'll see here through the status of like review in progress versus verified. And so when you'll see all the different people that this person has has added. So when you add a new person, you have your 3 steps of basic information, the relationships with your biological mother, father, adopted mother, father, and so forth. And then the last step, for us was important. Like, hey, what's the minimum amount of information you need to prove this? And it's this idea of a birth certificate or some sort of form that represents this, and with additional documents as well. Another use case actually that I thought about which would be cool is like, like what if we could have like specific flows for like how do you prove, how to get into community school? If you have a flow of like all the documents you need for that, so that you need specific flows for each of those. So this idea of adding your birth certificate, yada yada yada, you finish and you see that it's been added here, and then you can see everything about Israel, the late last night I was thinking about like this idea of like permissions and genealogy, and I was listening to like Taylor story. I feel like he didn't know that his best friend was actually his cousin, and I was like, okay, when you're actually creating these trees, it's a network effect. Like I'm creating a tree, someone else is creating trees, so on and so forth. And so there's this idea of like, hey, here's Taylor. And he's built up this tree. There's this other person who's also been developing their tree. And you can see this like anonymized relationship between Taylor and this ghost person. And what you'll see is that, hey, like this person has added someone that seems like it's someone that Taylor has added to. And so you can have this idea of like, hey, it looks like your father's a common data point. Like, can we build a bridge between your tree? So you can request to share that still a permission you that's involved in it. And then you can see like, your tree through permission is created. And like maybe John, that's probably not your cousin, but let's say John's your cousin, he's like, hey, he's added someone to the tree that you never knew, like you didn't know your dad's dad or something. And so they're just like, there's a concept, but like this idea that you can help build each other's trees. That's it. But the amplifying, yeah.
That's awesome. So, so I just wanted to add that we were focusing on one feature of a request form, and what he showed, I was just reminded that even though we were just adding one piece, this is what it looks like when it fits into the whole. This is what the whole picture would look like, and what all the other what the simple information of adding to the database, what it could be used for, beyond just adding information for one tree. It could be for even one.
Yeah.